I was screaming inside my head. It was so loud it hurt. And then everything in my head went dead quiet with a sickening snap that set my teeth on edge. Tina's eyes dried, but she kept twisting the gold ring on her finger while she chewed her lips bloody. She stared out the window silently. As he maneuvered the rumbler through the trash-littered streets of Syracuse, Chuck bit his already raw, bleeding fingertips. I couldn't shake the smell. "What stinks so much in here?" I asked quietly. No one answered, but the smell was so strong I twisted around to check the back. As I leaned over the seat, my pack slammed into Tina's shoulder. "Watch it, moron!" she snapped, and I gagged on the smell that came from her mouth. I quickly covered my nose and fell back into my seat. "Just chill, guys," said Chuck, and a fresh wave of toxic fumes came washing over me. My eyes started to water. The smell from their mouths came stomping into my world and wouldn't leave, no matter how I tried to distract myself. I pulled my shirt up over my nose, and we rode the rest of the way in dead silence. Behind us, the sun painted the sky with orange fire. It still smelled terrible. And Syracuse Central was worse. The airport was never meant to act as a permanent residence, but that's where we all crammed in night after night, hovel, sweet hovel. God knows how many people fit in there, and most of them toothbrush-free for the better part of a year. I felt sick the second I stepped out of the rumbler and onto the concrete landing area. Clipboard met us at the bay door, list in hand. He didn't need to ask what happened when he saw our faces. He just made a note on his board and called for some folks to tend the rumbler. My stomach threatened to rebel with every passing person. "Clipboard," I called from a few feet away. "I don't suppose we have any mouthwash kicking around here, do we?" I kept my shirt pulled up over my face, and Clipboard looked at me like I had two heads. When he opened his mouth to answer, I had to take a step back. Scope's pretty low on the priority list at the moment, man." He laughed, and I fought to keep my gorge down. I could even see the little bits of decay and scum clinging to his yellowed enamel. "I haven't seen mouthwash in a long time. What?" I didn't hear the rest of his question. I had to get outside. The fenced clearing area in the back was awash in the summer wind, and for the first time in an hour I was able to draw a single, solid breath. I sat in the high grass and stared up at the sky. The sound of the wind and the high weeds rustling in a hushed chorus drowned out the whispers that kept ringing in my ears just beyond the veil of hearing. I started laughing, and images of a zombified Pete flicked past my brain. It was so funny. There he was, a towering undead cretin with the most perfect row of pearly whites. His moans were a wave of spearmint, and I gladly let him come, uncaring as his zombie hands began to pull my flesh from my bones. I woke up with a start in the middle of the night, beneath the cloud-shaded stars. I sat up and held my aching head in my hand. Each faint whisper throbbed painfully. Then I smelled something terrible. "You all right?" It was Chuck, literally foul-mouthed Chuck. I opened my mouth to answer him, but my insides chose that moment to make a run for it. "Jeez," Chuck said, backing away from the spreading pool of vomit. "I'll get a doc." My head continued to pulse in painful rhythm. I could see the flashes of light exploding in the corners of my vision, and my nose was clogged with the stench of breath. Every heartbeat pounded my head with a steel hammer, and I could feel my eyes roll back into my head before I slipped into unconsciousness. The last thing I heard was those faint whispers from the dark corners of my mind. The next week was pure medicinal torture. I was pent up in the med wing with makeshift nurses checking my vitals every few minutes. I was hooked to an IV, and regular shots of medicine were pumped through plastic tubes into my waiting veins. All this attention and all this salvaged equipment, and not even the med staff could find the means to fix their breath. Every time they came close, I cringed and wept. Each question stabbed at my stomach with a violent urge to puke. Faint whispers had become more clear, and they kept pointing out the bits of food and plaque visible in every false yellow-green smile. No wonder plaque rhymes with Zach. I didn't realize at first that I was talking back to those slithering noises in my head, but the staff of the med wing did. It was all too soon before a counselor sat down beside me with a plastic grin and cold dead eyes. She tried to talk to me about the whispers, but I couldn't concentrate on her questions. Hers was a unique stink, the smell of mold and month-old pasta primavera. I realized something that very night. I wasn't getting out of here unless I pretended not to smell them anymore. Heaven forbid someone actually pointed out the utter collapse of oral hygiene in the zone. Oh no. I was sure that was why they wouldn't let me out of the wing. I lay there that night preparing, flexing my face muscles so they would not betray me. It was a perfect performance. I was able to keep it up long enough to be released back into population, back into the cloud of filth belching from their greasy throats and petri dish tongues. I immediately requested outside work, and out of pity, clipboard obliged. Most of the time I was able to stomach it out there where the wind blew. Lack of manpower eventually led to my restoration in the Corps. The whispers were right. The others didn't want me to go along, but I was anxious for the opportunity to get away from Central for just a few hours. I didn't mind. It would mean time spent in the open air. I put on my acting face and was normal as could be. What did you say? It was Chuck, shouldering his rifle. He looked at me cautiously. I didn't realize I'd been talking out loud. I'm, just saying a prayer. That would shut Chuck up. Tina had retired from the Corps and joined the education department. I wonder if she found her old holiday sweaters. It was almost Memorial Day. Instead, we were going out with a pair of twins, Calvin and Kevin. They had matching initials, matching mustaches, and matching rank mouths. It was about as unusual not to have a woman on the team as it was to have one extra man, but I didn't bother asking Clipboard about these changes. Honestly, it didn't matter that much to me. Let's get a move on, I said. Time's wasting. Everyone nodded, and within a few minutes we were on the road. The insides of the Rumble were like a halitosis gas chamber. I rolled down the window and stuck my head out to drink in the fresh air. We drove through the skeletal remains of the city, clawing up from the ground on either side, their insides splayed open by fire or storm. We didn't see many zombies, just a single here and there. We'd pause long enough to fire off a shot before heading back on down Salina Street. About halfway through the drive, we passed the spot where Peter had died. I saw the pile of metal had been pulled away, probably while I was in the med wing. I could still see the Irish Bargain Party paint that peeled away from the shattered glass, and I chuckled. Then I noticed what the other store window had said. Grocery. The interior looked fairly intact. Hey, stop here for a second, I called to Chuck. He passed a series of looks between the twins, but ultimately stopped. The whispers grew louder now, frenzied and high-pitched. When I looked down that alley, I swore I saw something shamble around the corner. A second look, and it was gone. I didn't mention this to the others. What are we here for? Asked Chuck in a voice thick with doubt. I just want to check something, I answered. Pay some last respects. For Pete. I must have sounded funny talking with my nose plugged, but the others didn't say anything. Carefully, I stepped out of the rumbler and hefted my rifle. I walked slowly over to the maw of the alley in front of me. The whispers were so fast now that they blended into static white noise. For some strange reason, the stench of breath was still strong. The concrete was stained brown, as were parts of the walls. The metal had been cleared away, and now the alley stretched far back, fully clear of debris. From the corner of my eyes, I spied the smoked glass of the next-door market. The shelves were down, but there was still a scattering of loose product littering the tiles. Nothing moved in the shadow-streaked interior.